With the first preseason game in the books, QB battles are starting to solidify. I brought on John Bushko to talk about it here on the Locked On NFL podcast.
You are Locked On NFL, your daily NFL podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. It's Tuesday, so that means you're stuck with me, Luke Braun at Luke Braun NFL. I do Locked On Vikings and filling in for Ross Jackson today, who I believe is stuck in some sort of travel nightmare. If you listen to Locked On Saints, he's going to be covering the joint practices, or if you are a Packers fan, he's going to be up there in Green Bay. So make sure you check out what he's got going on. But for now, we got John Bushko, who does Locked On Jets. I'm very excited to talk to you, John, because we have not gotten a chance to cross over yet. I joined the network about 4 weeks after the last time the Vikings played the Jets. So I am very excited to talk to you. I know you've got some QB battle stuff ready. And let's start with the Steelers, because I feel like that is the one that I wanted to know the most about. I skimmed a little bit. It sounds like it's pretty much Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett, and Mason Rudolph has sort of fallen out to the nether regions.
Yeah, Luke, I got to say, it's great to be on here. This is actually my second straight day on Locked On NFL. I was here yesterday to talk about the Jets, Zach Wilson's injury, so it's nice to be here and not talking about a painful Jets news story. But yeah,
for once.
Steelers, an interesting quarterback battle. And I think one of the things that's fascinating is if you look at this, it's almost like they don't want Kenny Pickett to be the starting quarterback. And the Steelers fans really do. And one of the things I find fascinating about this is that if you go back to the last time the Steelers were in this situation, it was 18 years ago.
Yeah.
It was when Ben Roethlisberger was a rookie.
And they kind of Charlie Batch?
That was Tommy Maddox was their starting quarterback.
Maddox, yeah.
He led them to an AFC South title in 2002. 2003 came along. He kind of struggled. So they go into 2004, and Tommy Maddox is the starting quarterback. And then week 2 of that season, he gets hurt. Ben Roethlisberger comes in, wins his first, I think, 13 regular season starts. He sits out the last week of the regular season because they had clinched the 1 seed. They beat the Jets in a painful memory of mine, an awful game. Doug Bryan misses 2 field goals in the last 2 minutes of regulation.
Oh, man.
They eventually lose in the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, could have played the Packers.
A painful memory of mine. But it's interesting because at that point, they did not want Roethlisberger to be the quarterback. He ended up going in because of an injury and ended up winning, I think, his first 15 starts before they lost to a tremendous New England team. And now we're back in this situation 18 years later, and it feels like they don't want Pickett to be the starting quarterback. It feels like they kind of want to go with the more experienced veteran in Trubisky.
Yeah, and that's like an understandable impulse, I think, for any team, because when it comes to a rookie that's like not ready, like there is this sort of like you draft a quarterback in the first round and everybody just wants him to be the guy right away. Sometimes you just have to transition. College and the NFL are different, and sometimes it takes more than, I don't know, the 4 months it's been since he's been drafted to get used to it. So I don't know. I think it's plenty okay. It seems like right now, like you said, Mitch Trubisky is the status quo option, and it's kind of up to the guy behind him to upset that status quo. So I know that you grinded some tape here for this. So I want your opinion. John Bushko, you are in charge of the Pittsburgh Steelers with no malice in your heart. What would you do, knowing what you know?
It's a tough call. I thought Trubisky played well in their preseason opener against the Seattle Seahawks. But I guess for me, like what Trubisky did doesn't matter quite as much because he's a known commodity.
Mm-hmm.
And what's another interesting thing about this is when you bring in a veteran in this situation, in a lot of cases, it's somebody you want to be like a game manager. And I view Trubisky as the anti-game manager.
He's
either
volatile.
Great or he's terrible. And I looked this up. In his career, he has 18 games where he's had a quarterback rating of 100 or better. And he's had 17 games where he's had a quarterback rating of 70.1 or worse. Now, he looked very good in that game against Seattle, but you know what he's getting. And in a situation like this, usually what happens is the veteran, if he gets the starting job week 1, he plays his way out of it. And I think we know sooner or later Mitchell Trubisky is probably going to play his way out of the job. So the question is, what do you have in Kenny Pickett? And Kenny Pickett, I thought, looked really good in that game. And I know he played the second half, so you're playing against guys who are borderline roster players, but Seattle really was not running a vanilla defense. I mean, they were mixing some things up, and Pickett knew what to do. I saw a couple of plays where they came out in a cover 2 shell, they rolled into cover 1. Pickett identified it immediately. He understood, and this is something I think rookie quarterbacks struggle with a lot. Sometimes they try and throw balls into too tight a window. Sometimes they get too aggressive. They just won't take the play that's there. I mean, there were plenty of instances where Kenny Pickett saw that he had like a 10-yard cushion, guys running a 6-yard out. He just takes it's free money, and he took it. A couple of good scrambles. And, rookie quarterbacks, sometimes they're a little too quick to run the ball, but I think that I liked what I saw from Pickett because you want him to be decisive. If he doesn't like what he sees in front of him, just take off and run. And, there was the famous play in the ACC championship game when he was at Pitt when he did the fakes. I don't think we're going to see that in the NFL. But
no, that ruled, though. I don't care that it was like super cheap. That was awesome.
It was amazing. And the other thing is when Seattle blitzed, I mean, I don't know how much of this was Pickett, but Pittsburgh was in the right protection. They were able to pick everything up. So it's a tough call. And, the other thing about this is, and this is kind of weird to say because Ben's going to be a Hall of Famer, but either one of these guys, even though Trubisky is kind of a middle of the pack veteran and Pickett's a rookie, they're probably going to get an upgrade at the quarterback position this year just because Ben
over what they had last year. Yeah, they had a corpse of Ben Roethlisberger.
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing is if you want to start Pickett, you have a really good back in Najee Harris to kind of lean on, and that's something I think the Jets are doing with Zach Wilson. They've drafted Breece Hall and Michael Carter the last 2 years. Mm-hmm. I don't think Najee Harris got the credit he deserved last year. Very durable guy, ate up a lot of carries for them. I think part of it's his average per carry was under 4 yards. He only averaged 3.9, but you have to put it into context of what he was dealing with. And the other Steelers running backs averaged under 3 yards per carry. So Najee Harris's 3.9 looks pretty impressive in that context. So I feel like if they go with Trubisky, we're eventually going to see Kenny Pickett this year. So they see him every day. They seem to be leaning towards Trubisky. I can understand why you might want to be cautious with a quarterback because I feel like once you put the rookie in, it's tough to take him out if he's not ready, if he needs a little bit more seasoning. But I think maybe I'd lean towards Trubisky, but I think they might have a quick hook this year if Trubisky loses some games for them, maybe doesn't play so well, and they maybe need a little bit of a spark.
Kind of reminds me of the Bears situation last year, where Justin Fields goes in, he was very clearly not ready, and then they had to hook him back out, and now the whole dynamic is weird, and now the confidence is weird, and you've got more things to fix on top of the things he already kind of came out of the box needing to fix as just a rookie quarterback. And you don't want to do that. So for me, if I were running the Steelers, I would say, I know Trubisky is not going to be ideal, but like you said, there's a lot of great stuff on this roster. We, damn near made the playoffs with Ben Roethlisberger and only being able to throw it 20 yards. There was nothing there. And so let's limp through until the kid's ready. And whenever that is, whether it's week 4, week 1, week 6, or week 10, there's kind of no pattern to guys who some quarterbacks are really good, but they take 10 weeks to be ready. And that's a totally normal thing and a process you got to let them through. But if you think that this whole dynamic will sink the Steelers, you can just go on to Bet Online and bet against them. You can bet on anything. You can bet on all sorts of futures. You can bet on my Vikings, John's Jets. You can bet on any game at Bet Online right now. All of the games, all 18 weeks are all available for you to bet. You can bet on player props with their player prop builder, build all kinds of wacky parlays. You can do their live betting apparatus to bet right in the middle of a game if you want to. Win totals, playoffs, who will finish where in the division, all sorts of stuff, including other sports, WNBA, MLB, tennis, golf, MMA, whatever you want. So go to betonline.net and get gambling right about now. That's BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. I want to flip to the other side of that Steelers-Seahawks matchup because I haven't harmed you enough, John. Let's talk about some Jets busts. And we'll start There's some failed Jets first-round quarterbacks. We'll start with the Seahawks, who are currently, it feels like, leaning toward, at least they started him in this game, 31-year-old Geno Smith versus Drew Lock, and you kind of have the stable, experienced veteran who's been a backup for a bunch of time versus the like volatile youngster with all the ups but also all the downs. It's a very classic situation. What do you make of it?
You know, Luke, I was saying to you earlier that I was excited to be on Locked On NFL. This is my second straight day here. Yesterday, I was talking Zach Wilson's injury, and I said, great, now I get to come and I don't have to talk about Jets quarterback misery. And now we're talking about
the second you
Geno
said
Smith.
that, I was going to point it out. And we're not done. We got another one coming down the pipe, so
The Jets are just
prepare
spreading
yourself.
their quarterback busts across the NFL. That's the Jets are just such a generous franchise. You guys get the rest of the
Spreading
NFL
their
gets to share in all these
like
these,
a dandelion in the wind.
It's just a wonderful thing. I think I watched both these guys play, Geno Smith and Drew Lock, and for me it's kind of an experience to hear Geno Smith referred to as the stable veteran, because I watched him early.
I know, right?
And he was anything.
He's 31.
but.
He knows what he's looking at.
And that to me is the thing, where it sounds like all the buzz has been that Geno Smith's ahead in the quarterback competition. And watching that game, I understood why. Geno's limited. I think Geno's really a backup in this league. And I got to give him credit for that, because I thought he was going to be out of the league in a couple of years after the way he failed with the Jets. And he's worked his way, he's built out a pretty solid career. And even when he played last year for Seattle for a backup, I thought he acquitted himself reasonably well. And there are some things he brings to the table. I've always said this about Geno, is when he gets the look he's expecting, he can deliver the ball where it needs to go. I mean, he can plant that back foot. He can throw the ball decisively. He even throws with anticipation. He can throw into tight windows. And you saw that in this game. I think, and it's funny because it reminds me a little bit, even though they're very different quarterbacks, but the guy he was kind of linked with the Jets was Ryan Fitzpatrick. And I always said that about Ryan Fitzpatrick, is that when he got the look he wanted, and when he got the look he was expecting pre-snap, he knew where to go with the ball. And that's, I think, kind of what Geno is at this point, and he made some nice plays. I think the issue with Geno is when he's not getting the look he expects, he maybe freezes a little bit. And there were a couple of plays where I thought he kind of abandoned the clean pocket. And sometimes he turned it into a good play. He's got legs. He made a couple nice runs in this game. He also sometimes, on a broken play, he can keep his eyes down the field and deliver the ball where it needs to get. But there were a couple of ugly moments for Geno. Again, I think he's more of a backup than he's a starter in this league. My guess is that Seattle's long-term quarterback is not on the roster right now. But as far as Drew Lock goes, Drew Lock made a couple of nice throws, but it was clear to me that there were points where he was predetermining where he was going with the football. I think there was a lack of touch on his throws. There are throws that need to be touch passes where he's throwing the ball. He's throwing a fastball. There was one time near the goal line where he tried to put some air under a ball, and it really didn't have the right amount of touch. And the other thing was, he took a bad sack in this game where there was an untouched blitzer coming off the edge. He just didn't feel him, and there was an open hot route back leaking out of the backfield. And the other thing was, Seattle was in the wrong protection, because the Steelers only rushed 5, and they should have been able to pick it up, but they weren't in the correct protection. So, my view on this was, I thought Geno Smith justified the headlines that he's ahead in this competition.
Okay, and that's the way the Seahawks have played it too, because they played Geno first. And again, like with the Steelers, you see the veteran has this kind of status quo where, all right, we're going to put the veteran ahead of you, and if the young guy wants to come take it, then take it, but the young guy has to kind of earn it, has to prove it a little bit more than the guy who's got more experience. It is so funny to be talking about Geno Smith that way, though, just because of the volatile things that I remember from, watching 2014, that weird 2015 Jets season. But I guess with the Seahawks, it's so hard for me to put any meaning on this, because the Seahawks are in such an unserious season. They're just in this weird transition. Like you said, the long-term guy's not on the roster. They're not going to become the team of Drew Lock for 10 years. And so you're kind of looking at 2 backup quarterbacks deciding who is going to captain the tank ship. And that sucks. Seahawks fans deserve better than that. But if we are putting ourselves in the brains of Pete Carroll, because Pete Carroll is he's 70 something. He does not have a tank season in him. He is going to try his best to win games here. who do you go to Geno and you just say, all right, let's just hope we don't get too many exotic looks? Or do you go with the Drew Lock and just say, you know what, we're going to be underdogs in every game, and the only way we win games is by crazy playmaking nonsense, and take the volatility and hope we get hot at the right time and see if you can't make something out of this, because I'm Pete Carroll and I don't know how to just pack it in. I don't know. It's more of a dilemma to me than usual, even though I probably think on the whole, over a huge sample, Geno Smith is the best quarterback. But this isn't a huge sample. It's a football season. They're notoriously small samples.
I think one thing we know about Pete Carroll is that he likes to play a conservative brand of football. He wants to run the ball.
True.
And
he does.
By the way, on paper, Seattle has a pretty good running back duo. You got Rashad Penny. He can stay healthy, which it's Rashad Penny, so I don't know if he can stay healthy. But Rashad Penny had a really good year last year. And
they always put the most effort into that run game, yeah.
Yeah, and Kenneth Walker III.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that speaks to the kind of team Pete Carroll wants. And I think Pete Carroll wants a quarterback who's going to be steady, who's not going to make the mistakes, who, again, knows where the ball we've said it 5 times. I still can't believe I'm saying it. Knows where it needs to go in Geno Smith. So I feel like Pete Carroll's going to want the lower variance quarterback. And it's funny, we're talking about the game they played in preseason against the Steelers this year. Last year, Geno Smith started in Pittsburgh, and Seattle had a bad first half, and in the second half of that game, they just committed to the run game and got themselves back into the game by controlling the line of scrimmage, running the football effectively. So I think of these two, I totally get you. It's a pretty very valid point you make about maybe you need a guy who can make crazy plays, but I just don't know if that's Pete Carroll's mindset. I think Pete Carroll wants to run the football. I think Pete Carroll, and you could argue this is an outdated view. I think a lot of people would argue it's an outdated view, but
of course,
Pete Carroll wants the quarterback to, the old cliche, to be a game manager and just make the throws he needs to make and avoid big mistakes.
Yeah, and I think that might be the way Pete Carroll takes it, and I think that's a really great speed run to a 5-win season. If I were
completely agree.
If I were 70 something and in probably one of my last years coaching, and I were given Geno Smith and Drew Lock, I do think the idea of because for me the let's be a run first team thing, the biggest thing with that is that it shortens the game a lot. Now everybody gets fewer possessions, and it's kind of easier to pull an upset on an 8 possession game than it is on a 13 possession game. If you just don't have to that's that many fewer stops your defense has to get and all that stuff. That's how a lot of upsets, really shocking upsets, happen, is where there was a couple of 8-minute drives and then suddenly everybody only possessed the team 3 times in each half, and then a couple of ones at the end, and then suddenly variance starts to take over. So I just want to take that, get into really high variance games where one possession could be everything, and then see if Drew Lock can't make 2 plays that are just enough. That feels like my best way to win about 13 of the 17 games on Seattle's schedule. So that's where I would go. But if I were playing, if I felt like the Seahawks were in a better spot roster-wise, I absolutely think Geno Smith is the better quarterback that will probably win you. I think the Drew Lock move wins you 4 games and the Geno Smith move wins you 5 or 6. But there is a weird corner case where the Drew Lock move wins you 8, and maybe you sneak into the playoffs on accident. And I don't think that exists with Geno. I guess that's where I'm at there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel like Locke probably has the higher ceiling, but I feel like it's not like a 50-50 split between what's going to happen. I feel like the high ceiling scenario is very low percentage.
It is, but it's the only one.
I think we've missed the obvious scenario, which Seattle is trying to invent a time machine and patch things up with Russell Wilson rather than because if I'm we're talking about if I'm 70-year-old Pete Carroll, and I'm only going to be there another year or two, why would I not just want to make another run with Russell Wilson and then Seattle can do whatever they want after that?
Yeah, I also thinking about it and just thinking about the other team we talked about, I think Kenny Pickett just starts on the Seahawks and it's not close.
That's the thing is it's the same because you have the stable veteran versus the young guy with upside, but it's different because Kenny Pickett,
we've seen enough from Drew Lock.
Feels like he legitimately could be the anser, whereas Drew Lock,
we kind of know what he is.
It's a Hail Mary. He was a throw in, maybe we can make something work with Drew Lock. I mean, it's not realistic to think he's going to be the answer in Seattle, I think.
Right. It's a dark time in Seattle. So let's leave Seattle and let's go to a different former Jets quarterback that will cause you pain and talk about what's going on in Carolina. Before we do all of that, let me talk to you about taking care of your car look, it's rainy season. Storms are everywhere. That's where Ross Jackson is, caught in a storm, probably somewhere about 15,000 feet in the air. And when you are driving through a storm, if your windshield wipers are streaky, that can be super dangerous. So a tip that I've been giving is replace those windshield wiper blades. But if you take that into a mechanic or go to an auto body shop, you'll have to ask. They'll charge you probably to fit it. They'll charge you all these extra fees. You're going to end up paying like $100 for a windshield wiper blade, or maybe they'll get you to try to replace the whole windshield wipers, which is more expensive. Don't deal with any of that. Go to rockauto.com. Rock Auto is a place where you can get any car part under the sun. It's insane how big their catalog is. You can just enter your make, your year, and your model. It'll take you through all sorts of options for all sorts of parts, including windshield wiper blades. Just that piece of rubber. Just measure your wiper and see what length you need, and it slides right on and off. It costs about $3.61 last time I looked at it. So go to rockauto.com. Whatever you get there, whether you're a huge gearhead or you just need some essentials like jumper cables or motor oil, you can go find it at rockauto.com. And in the How You Heard About Us section at checkout, make sure you let them know that Locked On sent you. Rock Auto, amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. All right, John, we're ripping off the Band-Aid here. Thank you so much for making Locked On NFL your first listen of the day. Baker Mayfield beating out Sam Darnold, it sounds like, in Carolina. He started in the first preseason game. How sad is this for you, somebody who probably back in 2018 had a lot of research put into these two names?
Devastating. I thought Sam Darnold was going to be great. I went.
It could have been the truth.
I made every excuse under the sun for 3 years for Sam Darnold. In fairness, there were a lot of them. I mean, the Jets. Look at the roster the Jets put out there. They hired Adam Gase as the quarterback whisperer to develop Sam Darnold. I mean,
yeah,
I still can't
Mr. Peyton Manning.
I still can't wrap my head around that one. It's just not going to happen for Sam Darnold, unfortunately. And look, I think the fact Baker Mayfield is even in Carolina right now speaks volumes about what the Panthers think about Sam Darnold, because he was their starting quarterback last year. And, before we talk about like their performances, I just like can't get over the different ways that they acquired these two quarterbacks, because these are both kind of reclamation projects. And for me, like Baker Mayfield is exactly what you want to do if you're looking for a reclamation project, because they bought low on him. They only gave up a fifth round pick. I think they're only paying like $5 million. Cleveland's eating a lot of that contract. Mm-hmm. Whereas Sam Darnold, and I, as like the number one excuse maker for Sam Darnold last year, I would have told you I thought he was a decent buy low candidate as a reclamation project. You could blame the Jets, you could blame Adam Gase. I certainly did. But the thing was, they paid a lot for him. They did not pay a reclamation. They gave up a second round pick, a fourth round pick, and a sixth round pick, and they picked up his fifth year option. So they're on the hook for $19 million this year. It's just so interesting. The same team did these both of these moves, one of which was like a really, I think, pretty savvy bet, and the other was a very unsavvy bet.
Yeah, it's a very funny situation in Carolina, because like I think taking advantage of the Browns is absolutely the right thing to do, and I do think it improved them at quarterback. They were sitting there with Sam Darnold. That absolutely is, you're right. It's not going to work out. If it were, it would have happened already. All the talent in the world, all the raw ability in the world didn't come together. Blame Adam Gase, blame the Jets organization or the Panthers organization for all the failures, whatever. A retrospective for another time. Baker Mayfield is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold right now, and I don't think many people would I don't think the Panthers disagree with that. And getting him for so much less, just because of the circumstance, and taking advantage of the corner that the Browns painted themselves into, is a savvy move that does help to undo some of that like trauma of paying out the nose for Sam Darnold for some reason. So I guess the question kind of becomes, are we calling this battle? Is it over? Is it Baker Mayfield? And if so, does that turn the Panthers into a team we actually should like pay attention to in the NFC? Or are they just going to kind of sit there and be the 9th, 10th seeded team, and then we forget about them and they pick 10th overall next year?
Well, by the way, a little PR here. If you'd like to hear complaints about the Jets hiring Adam Gase, tune into Locked On Jets on the day that ends in Y, because even 2 years later, I'm still complaining about Adam Gase.
Absolutely. Free and available on all platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
It's interesting. I don't know that this makes Carolina a playoff team, but I think it puts them maybe a little bit more in the mix because at the end of the day, how much of a difference is there between the ninth or 10th team in the conference or the sixth or seventh? I mean, it's maybe a couple plays here or there. This is a league where
Sure.
about half of all games are decided by less than one score. And by saying trading for Baker Mayfield was a savvy move, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. I think it's just you look at the risk reward ratio. It's pretty good for Carolina because even if it doesn't work out, they really have not given up much. And the upside, people forget it. This time last year, people were talking about Baker Mayfield maybe being on the fringes of being a top 10 quarterback, not top
Mhm.
5, but arguably top 10. He was a quarterback when Cleveland made the playoffs. Cleveland made the playoffs with Baker Mayfield.
Mhm.
Cleveland. So I think he raises their ceiling. He's shown he can work in a situation where the pieces are good. Carolina's got some pretty solid receivers. You got DJ Moore. You've got Robbie Anderson had a terrible year last year, but he's a decent receiver. I don't know if Terrace Marshall Jr. what he is right now. I really liked him going into the draft. A lot of it's going to be, can Christian McCaffrey stay healthy, which I think at this point you have to have doubts about. By the way,
You're getting
never give a running back a
average.
second contract.
Yeah, 11, 12 games out of him, and that's kind of all you can expect. Yeah.
Never give a running back a second contract, but that's a story for another day. So, but I mean, I think it makes them better. I think if they get a couple good bounces, maybe I'm not sure I picked them to go to the playoffs, but I think it's a team now. And again, I think there's a very fine line between being like the 9th team and the 6th team. It maybe just be a couple lucky bounces of the ball, maybe some injury luck. If your schedule breaks for you, I don't know how much better it makes Carolina, but I do think it makes Carolina more likely to be a team that makes the playoffs.
Yeah, I feel like with Sam Darnold, they're a team you kind of like. Obviously, everybody in the actual rooms and buildings will take everybody seriously, but like you got the Panthers coming up with Sam Darnold, you can kind of say, all right, we'll probably chalk that up as a win if you're a fan, right? And with Baker, I think it's less so. I still believe in Baker. I'm not going to quit him. I think his injury held him back a lot more than the public wisdom is like thinking about. And I think if he can stay healthy, if McCaffrey can stay healthy, I think the Panthers have something. Those are huge ifs, and the parlay of that is probably pretty unlikely. But I think they have something that at least you have to take seriously, and they can be, if not a playoff team, a spoiler. The kind of team. Oh my goodness, the Saints need to win this game, or the Bucks will clinch the division, and they're playing in the Panthers in Carolina. Like that kind of situation becomes the role that the Panthers can play, and they would be taken seriously in that game. They're not going to be a team that's on 2 touchdown underdogs going into every game like you're going to see with somebody like the Bears or somebody like the Falcons, that are just like total catastrophes right now. If Baker Mayfield can stay healthy, I think you've brought some respectability to that organization. But I guess the question is twofold. A, and you watched him and I haven't, so I'm asking you, does he look healthy? And B, if so, is he a possible long-term option for Carolina, or is this a similar bridge situation like where Seattle is?
I think he could potentially be a long-term option, but I think it's very much a prove-it situation. He only threw, I think, 7 passes in the game, and
okay.
I think one thing to look out for early in the season is, even though Carolina has really sold in the media that Baker understands the system, but you have to remember the timing of this trade. This happened awfully late, even though Carolina is installing a new system with Ben McAdoo. It was pretty clear that Baker is still learning some things in the system. There were a couple of plays where there were some miscommunications there. There was one where I think he was trying to throw back shoulder. The receiver kept going down the field. There was a kind of a botched RPO play. There was a deep ball where he threw it to double coverage. So I'm not sure Baker's completely comfortable with the system and these receivers at this point. And it might be the type of situation where this team gets better the deeper we get into the season. Baker did not have the full offseason to work himself into the playbook, to develop chemistry with the receivers during the offseason program. So it's one of those things where maybe it's not going to look great early on, but we know Baker's got the potential. I mean, he was the number 1 pick overall, and he had that great rookie year. He was the quarterback when Cleveland went to the playoffs a couple of years. And you made a great point that I think he was playing hurt last year, and I think that played into why his performance was so poor. So, I mean, look, I don't think you're signing him to an extension today. And that, again, it goes back to why I liked the move, because they're not committing to him. They're not throwing a ton at him. They're taking a kind of
They get a trial run here.
low risk flyer on a guy with a lot
Yeah.
of ability. And I think he could potentially be I'm not saying he will be, but I think he could potentially be the answer in a way that maybe Drew Lock, I'm very, very skeptical, could be in Seattle.
Yeah, and he's playing for it maybe a little bit. So maybe this, we've got position battles in Pittsburgh and Seattle, but here we don't necessarily have Baker Mayfield versus Sam Darnold. We have Baker Mayfield versus the unknown of 2023. Can you play well enough to make the Panthers commit to you? I think that might be what he's playing for. Look, as the preseason wears on, situations like this, position battles all over the league, are always super, super interesting to cover. And for that, we got you covered here on the Locked On NFL podcast every single day. Tomorrow, you'll get Tony and James, the Wednesday crew. We will see you all then. For John Butchko, you can find him at Locked On Jets. You can find me, Luke Braun, at Locked On Vikings. All of that's free and available wherever you find your favorite podcast, because we're all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.